On this episode, I'm going to be talking to a friend of mine about building digital libraries, something that we've talked about on the T-Rex Labs channel, we've talked about on the podcast before, but he's going to walk through how he has already done it. And there's more than that. There's learning how to build certain types of tools, but also how to inspire others. So welcome back to another T-Rex Arms T-Rex Talk, which is the podcast where we have conversations with folks, sometimes monologues, but my favorite is when it's not a monologue, it's a conversation. So I have a guest here with me today. Jacob, we have known each other for a while. We've known each other in person for less than a year, but I think we've interacted on the internet for a long time, and you're with Gridbase. So
Correct.
Why don't you explain first and foremost what Gridbase is? It overlaps with a bunch of stuff that we've been doing at T-Rex Arms, a bunch of stuff that the gun industry is doing, but take it away.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here in the studio. It's a pleasure to be here. Of course, Tennesseans and Texans have a long history
helping each other out.
Helping each other out.
Yes.
So yeah, in the spirit of that, I'm happy to be here and to talk about Gridbase and why I think it's relevant or important. And, at its core, Gridbase is focused around community rehabilitation and infrastructure. The thought that keeps me up at night is that there's no resupply.
Oh,
and having to rebuild from scratch, and that no one's coming to save you. And of course, as civilians, we don't have the luxury of being resupplied at any given point in time, as we've witnessed, in recent events where the people that are supposed to come and relieve you, by some reports aren't, by some reports are. Either way, if they are or are not, it doesn't sit well with me, the idea that I have to be dependent upon someone else for my sustenance.
Yeah, the dependence is an interesting one. Yeah, so one of the things, first of all, even now, many days, weeks after the hurricane has landed and left, there's still just so many confusing reports coming out of, and it's not that far from here.
Yeah.
Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee, it's just tremendous confusion. But yeah, the worst case scenario is that FEMA is a large government organization that has wasted all of its money and doesn't actually want to help regular people. The best case scenario is they're a government institution that's just terrible at what they're supposed to be doing. So somewhere inside of there, the ball is getting dropped, and that has been, I hope a wake-up call for a lot of people in a good way, that they do need to be not just more dependent on their neighbors, but also taking more personal responsibility themselves.
Yeah.
So I have been talking to folks, and a lot of the immediate things you think about are, of course, your immediate needs, water, food, etc. But Gridbase specifically does other stuff, stuff that is maybe not your primary staple needs, but the stuff that you need later on, other stuff that you would want to have access to.
Yeah. So, the Library of Alexandria has haunted me since I found out about it. The amount of information that was lost, what could have been developed with that information if we still had it.
Yeah.
And, I look at specifically Pocket, Gridbase at large, but Pocket specifically, as this tool to kind of insulate against that reality.
Yeah.
In a macro sense. In a micro sense, you're taking an entire library with you. We live in the world where we need internet. We just do. We don't have the tribal knowledge of how to make butter. We don't have the tribal knowledge of how to skin animals.
Right.
We've lost a lot of that. And as we attempt to regain it, of course, we lean on books and the internet to teach ourselves. Or in the case of, to reference back to what recently happened in Eastern Tennessee and Western North Carolina, these people had no idea they needed to even know any of these things in some cases. And so in a time of distress or in general, having this knowledge repository that you own to be able to reference these different things, to gain these different skill sets, I believe is critically important. And we have now recently these, Starlink. Is kind of a newer advent of how we get information.
Right. Yeah.
One interesting thing about that, and I love Starlink. I have Starlink on my truck. It's great. There's still a terms of service that you have to agree to.
Right.
And at any point in time, any company could step in and buy Starlink. The terms of service could change. We have no control over that.
People have been calling to nationalize Starlink and SpaceX. Again, that kind of like shines a light on a, it isn't just like, oh, Starlink is so important, it's starting to fail, maybe we should nationalize it. It was like, oh no, Starlink is doing way too well and SpaceX is doing way too well and it's making everybody else look bad. That's why we should nationalize it. It's the complete opposite.
So I look at, you know, specifically Pocket and all the line of products that we sell now and will sell in the future as there's no terms of service with Pocket. It's the same as your library in your home. They're your books. I cannot go in and change anything because you researched a topic that I didn't like, you know? And so with what we're doing specifically with community rehabilitation and preparedness for the future, and really a thought experiment is about owning a giant collection of information that can be shared for any purpose at any given time. Of course, it's easy for our primal brains to default onto these worst case scenarios, but there's other scenarios, road trips, in-flight Wi-Fi is down, whatever, right? There's all kinds of different environments where we need these resources. Yeah. And, so yeah, that's what we do in a nutshell, and the products that we make are focused on keeping people decentralized, you know, and there's a community collaboration aspect to what we do, because like I mentioned at the very top, that there's no resupply coming. So if all we have is our own skill set and all we have is knowledge and that is our power, then we need the ability to access that in mass at any point in time. Yeah, that's what we focus on doing. Yeah, and I mean the internet is absolutely incredible. Very recently, I had a chest freezer die, and instead of pulling out the user manual and reading through this or pulling an engineering book off the shelf and trying to figure out what a good capacitor, like how you test capacitors, what you set your multimeter to, I just got on YouTube, found the exact model of the thing. There's a video of somebody explaining how to pull the capacitor out. Like, it is so easy, and we've gotten so lazy about some of this stuff that, I don't have the engineering books in my house to do some of these things, but YouTube is there. Yeah. So as long as YouTube is there, it's super tempting to just use it and become more reliant on it. And then, YouTube has been relatively bug-free up until pretty recently, but there's a lot of other services that aren't. I rely on archive.org for a bunch of stuff. Wikipedia links to archive.org now in the Wayback Machine for most of their links. It's been down for about a week because of bad actors, denial of service attacks, and people just messing with the website. So like, these are fragile things, and some of them are more fragile than you think. We've always had the ability, well, I shouldn't say always, in recent years, we've had the ability to download and save things. Certainly plenty of people have home servers or have downloaded YouTube videos that they've found valuable. So there's nothing that prevents, someone from doing that. You know, what we've kind of realized is that people don't know what to download. You know, they don't know what skills are important, or they just simply don't have the time or the resources to figure that out. For the people that do have the time and the resources to figure that out, go to qx.org. Use their tools to download their libraries. Use a service like YouTube DLP or YTDLP to download YouTube videos and keep them in an archive. You can set up a home server for relatively inexpensively. You should be doing those things. For the people that don't have the time, the know-how, what have you, and that's where I find that most people in this space like to touch grass. Me and you are of the few people that most people don't want to be Linux system administrators for some reason. I don't want to be either. I have tools that I need. Yeah. So. Last week I was trying to do something inside of Python, and boy, was it infuriating to realize how terrible I am at remembering that sort of stuff. And that's really where Gridbase came about, is that I needed this tool. It didn't exist. I did not own a computer 2 or 3 years ago. I was iPhone app user only. And I needed this tool, and I've researched away and found out that I could make it, and here we are. But that is not who I am. I'm somebody who would like to be outside doing things tactily with my hands, and that's where the aha moment for Gridbase came. Is I was just like, oh, I wish I could buy this. And I was like, I bet there's a lot of other people who wish the same. And would like to just get it and move on with their lives.
For sure. So I should have brought mine that you gave me into the studio so I could hold it up, but we can maybe drop some pictures in. But
pictures plenty. Yeah.
It's a very simple idea. It is a bunch of files stored on a device that has a Wi-Fi and a battery. So you turn it on, and then using your phone, it doesn't have a screen because your phone probably has a screen, if you haven't broken it. And then all you have to do is use 5 devices at a time, I think is where the Wi-Fi tends to kind of max out.
Yeah.
5 different people could be using this digital library and reading all kinds of stuff off of this anywhere. It's in a waterproof case. So yeah, I love the concept. There's a couple of things that I wish we had. But one of them is just, I've talked about QEX on some labs videos in the past, this idea that digital information should be stored, not just so that it can't be lost. That's a huge one. It's really easy to lose digital data, but also so that you have a milestone so that you can go back and compare the digital data that's up with the digital data from 5 or 10 years ago to see if it has been altered, tainted, manipulated, poisoned in some way. Yeah.
It's interesting that you brought that up because I will often get into arguments with AI. I find myself really pushing the limits of AI. And I have, for people that don't know, you can build your own off-grid language model using a service called Ollama. Mm-hmm. And there's plenty of different models, and we feature that on our base station. We have off-grid and language learning models so that if you're out camping or whatever, you can search things and have ChatGPT-like convenience off-grid. You can do the same thing. And so I have these two different, I have OpenAI, ChatGPT as well that I use all the time. Mm-hmm. And I was asking it about the Trump assassination attempt. Uh-huh. And it was like, no, there was no assassination attempt on Donald Trump. And if you went and asked the other, which it's a separate LLM model.
Sure,
but if you went and asked it, it gave you a bunch of information about the time, date, place, and all these kinds of things. So it's interesting that you bring up the data manipulation and altering because especially as AI gets integrated in how we are delivered data, there's even more bias or gates or whatever you want to call it that prevent us from being able to access exactly what it is we're looking for. It's not as straightforward as going down section whatever and finding the encyclopedia and getting a straight answer from something that's peer reviewed and has sources.
Right. Yeah. No, it's interesting the way that has developed. And one of the interesting battles that exists in the AI space is this one of how you summarize information. So there's a blog that I follow, Hand Waving Freakoutery. It's a great source for statistical information. He not predominantly. He spends a huge amount of time writing about guns, gun crime, gun statistics, firearm-related laws. If you ask ChatGPT to summarize what his blog is, it talks about the statistics. It does not talk about the guns. But Perplexity will say, he mostly talks about guns. Yeah. So there's just a fascinating thing where the biases and the inputs for some of these different models are not clean, pure, untainted.
And I'm not sure that it's even all... I mean, I don't necessarily want to attribute it to maliciousness as much as just ineptitude of its ability. It's new.
It can always be both.
It can always be both.
But it's,
we're up against many factors on getting a straight answer, which is what we're talking about today.
For sure. So, once again, we kind of see that the more layers there are that separate you from the thing. If you want information, the more layers that there are in the cloud, the storage, the translation steps, the AI engine that actually has to find it for you, the search engine, the more layers there are, the more failure points exist. So maybe the information is fine, it's untainted, it's easy to get to, the server is up, but if the search engine doesn't work, you can't find it. Right. So the more failure points there are, the more fragile the system is. How much, what you provide with Gridbase are tools that let you own the whole thing. The whole thing lives on hardware that you control and software that you can see. And how much of that did you design or build? Because you're using off-the-shelf tools.
It's all COTS.
It's stuff that's theoretically not that hard until you try to do it yourself. Then it's hard. Then you go to your website and buy the turnkey system.
So it's all commercial off the shelf. Like I told you in the beginning, I'm no tech wizard. That wasn't my thing. The only thing that I really did was QEX did not support the Pi 02W.
Okay, yeah.
They supported the 3, the 4, and up, but to get it small as possible, we really wanted to run it on the 2W. And we looked at different boards to bring it out on. It came from a place of making the base station, which was a rehash of a project from Dosher Design, who made the original Cyber Quick Kit, which was pulled from an inspiration out of a video game, I can't remember what it was called, Cyberpunk 2077.
Oh, yeah.
So there's all this, and then if you go even further back, there used to be telecom companies that had these like fold out computers with keyboards on them, and they would plug them into like AT&T network things, and they would K-Pros
and stuff like that.
So this idea for like cyber decks has really been around as long as computers have been around in this case design. As that got walked up, kind of similar thing with Jay Dosher's project was that it wasn't available. You had to build it yourself. And so we brought that forward. Then when we introduced that, people were like, I don't need all this CyberDeck stuff. I really just need the off-grid internet in a box.
Yep.
So then we reduced it down, and I was like, if that's what people want, then that's what we'll make. And so we reduced it down, took that, and put it onto a 02W. So of what I made was alterations because Kiwix will tell you that it does not run on a 02W. And it will not if you just use exactly what they've done and put it on a 2W. There are alterations that you have to make to get it to work on a 2W. That's what we made.
Yeah.
So that was trial and error, nights on nights of typing in different things and seeing what worked and researching why it wouldn't work and whatever. And Kiwix still holds the position that it will not run on a 2W, but ours does.
It does run.
It will. Yeah. And it continues to. And one thing that you brought up that I wanted to address was that, and this is an element that I was blindsided by recently, was that, yes, you own Pocket. You own the information on it. However, there's a limitation we found for some browsers to be able to access it, because browsers will recognize it as a security threat and not allow you to bypass it. So you use other browsers. But then we ran into another issue, is that some customers experienced on certain browsers with certain iOS updates that audio wouldn't pull for the videos.
Oh,
so there's
interesting.
these things that we're learning. Like the hard data that's there is good. And now we know what works. We know that you have to be on X OS with X browser to get the audio to function, but that's an interesting limitation that we've run into. I still find that
there's a lot of stuff that's constantly moving in this space.
As other people are updating stuff, we will have to stay on top of making sure that it doesn't become obsolete. But from the beginning, we've recommended that people get an isolated device, a ghost phone, whatever, that is paired with Pocket and sits in a Faraday bag, and not necessarily using your everyday device, because you're going to update it, you're going to keep it updated, but ideally you would use something that's dry and locked and not updated in time capsules so that it functions when needed.
So let's talk a little bit about trends, because I have been a computery nerd for probably longer than you have, and I feel like there has been a very distinctive trend over the last couple of decades where owning your own code, well, I shouldn't say owning your own code, because there was a lot more sharing of code back in the day. I feel like there was a lot of people making copies of stuff, like writing stuff, sharing it around, posting all sorts of stuff on bulletin boards and things like that. So in some ways, there was this larger open collaborative thing, but there was an assumption that, you would keep files, you would store files. If there were a service that provided files on the internet, you would download those. There wasn't streaming, there was downloading and archiving in your own spot. And the pendulum has swung towards convenience, to where people don't download MP3 files for podcasts like this one anymore. They listen on Spotify or YouTube. People don't download YouTube videos to show their friends later. The assumption is their friends will have 5G service wherever they go. We'll just watch that video. We'll just watch this very ephemeral, intangible stream of content.
It's nothing. It's a woozy. It's a wazzy.
Yeah, it's just there's nothing there. Like there aren't files anymore. And when you were an app person, like you used to be, you just open the app and the app just shows you content, as opposed to being like, I need the manual for this chest freezer on my hard drive, or in a place where I can remember where it is.
Right.
And so it is interesting that the trend has gone the other way, towards the ephemeral content that the algorithm tells you what you want to watch and then it shows it to you. Is the pendulum swinging back? Because you have customers who are interested in something that is, still ones and zeros, but it's knowable ones and zeros, trustable ones and zeros.
Is the tangible swinging back? I think that the populace is equal parts divided on being fully tapped into this technological future where electricity is always going to exist and my car runs off of it, and and then there's other people who are a little more trepidatious and less willing to adapt to that. And I think that with each passing day and each event that happens, the pendulum will continue to swing towards tangible, hard goods, not what relies in the AWS cloud. We were promised a future that I'm not sure we'll ever see. It is 2024. I should have an app that makes my hair grow. I don't have that.
My grandfather was promised flying cars. When are they getting here?
The Elon AI robot was a human. I don't know that God will allow us to get past a certain point. I think the Tower of Babel has been built as high as it can be built.
Interesting.
With regard to technology. And I think everything from here out is a rehash and a rebrand. I don't really know that we're going to see more technology. It's like movies. Movies are just remakes of old movies. There's not new ideas. And that's a lot perpetuated by the industry itself and the people that play a part of it. But I think that technology kind of follows a similar line where we will not get past a certain point, and it's foretold that we won't. There's not going to be some crazy thing that happens that because people's greed and their drive for power gets in the way of that. We don't get access to the Area 51 technology, and people couldn't handle it if they did have access to it. We know it's out there. It's unclassified in many documents. It's not a conspiracy theory. We know it, but it's not accessible to us. So with that, I think to answer your question directly, will people fall back in with tangible goods, or will they keep their head in the AWS cloud? I think that the more we see that the future we were promised is a lie, the more we will go back to valuing the ephemera of real goods. And I think that, like I said, every passing day we get closer and closer to people valuing in-person connections and valuing in-person books and the texture and the sound of turning a page. I think that will continue to be more and more valuable than your Kindle e-ink screen. Yeah.
Well, and I think that you can see a little bit of that. Like 15 years ago, KiwiX, is it pronounced KiwiX or KiwiX?
They are a company based out of Scandinavia, Norway, something like that.
So it's
who knows how they pronounce it? But
when
I was talking to Stefan, he said KiwiX.
Okay. So KiwiX. KiwiX is an example, I think, of a shift, because 20 years ago, KiwiX didn't need to exist.
No.
But the fact that something like that exists that allows you to more easily package and archive data.
They did it for teachers.
Things. Yeah.
They did it for teachers in Vietnam who were teaching English.
Because there's still places out there that don't have the ubiquitous cloud.
Yeah. So and that's why it primarily focused on educational programs at the start. I mean, KiwiX has been around, I think, over 10 years or at 10 years. And their start was basically just teachers. It was founded as a nonprofit to support teachers. And only now is there this need or desire or interest in something more than that. You know? But
first world guys like us
in the Congo or whatever that were teaching students. Like there was no Starlink, there was no cell tower, there was no nothing. It was KiwiX.
Yeah, but now there's an interest for more people to have some of this stuff, which is neat. I kind of want to go back to like this deeper conversation about how far technology can go, because I completely agree with you that the limitation is the human factor, the human frailty, and the human fallenness. I think there's lots of room for us to go, technologically speaking, but I also think that it's real easy, and I do this all the time, to fall into this idea that technological advancement is this linear line that goes from rocks to copper to iron, and then you get steam, then you get airplanes. I think it's actually all different ways that you could go. But I kind of want to ask how you personally got into this. Yeah, because that's a crazy rabbit trail that I kind of want to get into. But let's not get off of.
Can I sum a thought up real quick?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. That is the normal path.
We assume it's a very linear.
When people are free, the bigger government gets, and the more government steps in the way of free people, the less innovation you get.
Oh yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
So as governments get more restrictive, and as we get to this one world situation that we're seeing where these groups want more and more power over a wider and wider area. That's why technology will stop. You see what Elon can do with recapturing a 11-story building using rockets. Like, that's what free people do. You know, but we will not see that, in my opinion, because we will get eventually, we will have this one world currency. We will have these things, and it will stifle the development of technology. So it's not that we couldn't get there. It's that people are in the way of us getting there and of our freedoms to explore those things. But,
and a perfect example of that is where you see innovation is in areas that are not regulated. So like we passed it's not a law, it's a regulation, but we set a regulation in the 80s saying that civil aircraft have a speed limit, which is under Mach 1. That's why we don't have supersonic air transport, is that speed limit that was set by the government. But there weren't speed limits set on computers and cloud computing and servers. And so that's why people who wanted to push the envelope went to a place where there was freedom to do so. And that's why I think we see massive development in the computer space and in the code space where there is freedom. And then, if you and I wanted to start a company that builds supersonic passenger transport, we would have to start by hiring hundreds of lawyers to fight the FAA before we hire a single engineer. And there's no good ROI on that. We're not going to do that.
We'd have to have enough money to influence politicians.
Yeah, we would start something else instead.
Citizens United got in the way of people being able to innovate, you know, and
it's kind of crazy to me. Going back to Elon Musk, one of the reasons that I think that Elon Musk is a bigger deal than people think is he figured out with Tesla, because cars are heavily regulated. He figured out with Tesla how to work within regulations and how to hire lawyers to challenge regulations. So in some ways, I feel like that's one of his superpowers that nobody talks about. People talk about him being a genius engineer. People also talk about him being an idiot. I think it's clear at this point he's not actually an idiot. Twitter just thinks he's an idiot. But he also owns Twitter. So who's, But one of his tools in his toolbox that rarely gets brought up is he's been fighting government regulators for a long time, and he has a lot of lawyers, and he's working in some of these heavily regulated space, and he's finding unregulated parts of that space to innovate in. So that's cool to me. I don't think that he's, going to be the Galt. He's going to be the savior. He's going to be the guy that does the thing. But he is doing a really interesting thing. He's demonstrating that, you want to make airplanes, you don't have to be Boeing. You can just skip airplanes and make spaceships. You don't have to be as bogged down by the government as Boeing is. You can make cars without being Ford. You can make last mile global internet happen without money from the government.
There's the regulation aspect. I think as important as that, I would say, is the economic aspect.
Sure.
Where when people are squeezed economically to the point where they're at now, you end up, that's exactly what's happening now is what happened in border towns in Mexico. Mm-hmm. People resort to crime because a week's wage is not, you can't buy enough groceries for your family. And we're seeing that in action now, where people who were making good money cannot afford the same things they could afford so long ago. Mm-hmm. So as people are economically squeezed, they have it becomes solely about primal instincts to provide for their family or themselves, and there's not enough ability there economically in the RAM of their mind to expand and believe beyond that. There's the regulation aspect. Yes, you have to have that relinquished, but there's also the economic impact that is created with or is the lack of however you want to say it, the lack of creative freedom when people are economically stressed.
Which is another reason that I don't think we should start our supersonic jetliner company. Is inflation has so impoverished people that even if we built Concorde 2, there's the only people that would ride on it.
Tickets.
The only people who want to ride in are the people that already hate Elon Musk.
Right.
So
your question was
let's get back to how you got into this, because there's another aspect too. There's the regulatory ceiling.
Right.
There is the cold water of being economically constrained. Right. But then there's also a thing where if people are not excited about a thing, they're not going to be interested in a thing. Sure. And one of the other reasons that I think Elon Musk is successful is he fights regulations. He's doing stuff economically to overcome certain things. He has gotten people excited about a mission. So when you watch that heavy booster come down and get caught, and you listen to the people in the control room cheering, they are doing a thing that they are excited by, and that helps them kind of work past the fact that those are brutally complicated problems to solve, and they've blown up a bunch of rockets, and everybody on Twitter says that they're idiots. Like they can look past all that stuff because they're excited about a thing.
Right.
So how did you, to segue back to the question, how did you get interested in this? You saw an economic need because people wanted to buy a thing that didn't exist, but how did you get into this particular area of being an archivist and building computer tools?
Yeah. Well, at the very nose of it, my wife was with child. And as she was nesting around the house, as mothers do when they're having children, I felt utterly useless. I don't know.
I know.
Like, what am I supposed to?
Yeah.
She was so busy. I've never seen my wife like that.
Yeah.
And my wife's brilliant, and she was painting murals on the walls, and it was just like in the kids' room and just had all kinds of projects. And I was like, I got us the house, and we have a very traditional marriage and relationship. So all of the normal roles that I would fulfill, I did, but I just kind of felt like there was something I was missing in that time. And, so I just started to do my own mental triaging of, okay, well, what, my son was going to be born in January. So what if the hospitals are froze out? Or what if I don't have access to roads? So I sold our car. I bought us a Lexus GX 470, most venerable off-road vehicle you could possibly get.
Long track record, yes.
Yeah, long track record. So I bought that, and I kind of started to build up the fundamentals of getting to the hospital. But then I started to work even more into the well, what if the hospitals aren't there? What if we have another COVID? It kind of led me down this path of all right, we need to be prepared to birth my son at home. And what does that look like? Well, I was not going to, my wife was 7 months pregnant when this whole thing kind of started. So I was not going to become an OBGYN in 60 days.
No.
90 days.
No, but there's lower levels. There's midwifery. There's you can be a doula. You can also just be an old school dad. I needed a tool. I heartily endorse home birth, by the way, just FYI. But go on.
Yeah, I needed a tool that allowed me to have resources, not only to make that my son's transition into this world a healthy one, but also to take care of my wife after the fact if there was any sort of issue. And so that's the nose of where this happened was like me up. I would work 9 to 5, and then I would work 5 to 9 on doing that part. And there was many days where I was just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And my wife was like, "Come to bed," and I'm like, "I can't,"
I gotta figure this out. Yeah. So that resonates with me. Now I cheated. My wife is a doula, so before we got married, she already had a huge stack of books on this very subject. So I felt pretty well prepared by our offline knowledge, but also that's relatively rare. So building the tools, building the library, building the information so that you have access to it.
Predating that, I lived in a van for 2 years in Colorado while I went to A&P school. And there was many times out there where you were just completely disconnected. And so that was kind of where I started to figure out about ham radio and some of these other things. That all came about later on, but that was kind of the genesis of me recognizing a need for off-grid communication and information was living in the van. And a lot of what happened when my wife was 7 months pregnant was the result of interests that were spurred when I lived in the van and kind of actually at an action point for those ideas and things that I had learned about earlier on. I've always had a passion for ephemera and hard tangible goods and record collections and books. And my grandfather owned a salvage yard, and my grandmother was a librarian hoarder. So I've just been surrounded by these things. So I kind of had a natural proclivity to that. But, specifically with Gridbase, I was certainly living off grid in the van. And everything that kind of came after that was a result of course, the radio thing was part and parcel to that, which is
taking
if we have
responsibility, decentralized communication.
We need the communication aspect of it too. And so they kind of just went hand in hand with that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Do you have any radio projects that you can talk about? Anything in particular that's new or cool or?
Yeah, a ton. Personal projects. I just finished building, and we'll go take a look afterwards. But this is the inaugural trip of the mobile command center.
Oh, nice.
So complete with Starlink and 2 meter, 70 centimeter scanners, all the rest. It's been performing excellently for this whole trip. So there's tons of radio projects always going on. with personal radio stuff, it's really interesting because it's so heavily regulated. It's not really an opportunity that I see for an individual person to jump in and make an effective wave in the radio space. Most of my time is spent learning about those radio protocols and then trying to translate that to people in a way that they can digest and understand. So that's my number one project, is packaging the information and translating it to people so that they can have this ability for themselves. We have people out there like Josh Hashnazi and the Tech Prepper and a lot of these other monoliths. The other dude, the most important one, you had him on. He's the most important one, and I'm blanking right now.
S2 Underground?
No, not that guy. The other radio guy that you had out here. Y'all shot the HF in the parking
lot. So Tech Prepper, we talked to Tech Prepper, but Jason who lives
KM4ACK.
Yeah.
That is the guy that when I lived in the van spurred all this for me.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Jason is my North Star.
Yeah. So Jason is the I think he would laugh hearing that, because he's the most approachable, friendliest guy ever.
He was doing all the hand pie stuff.
He doesn't think of himself as a monolith. He think of himself as a little guy
Most
on the
monoliths
edges.
never do.
Yeah.
No. So he's instrumental.
Guy.
And so what I try and do is I try and take the information from those people, because I can sit and watch a 35-minute Jason video, but most of my audience cannot. And they just need to get interested. The thing that Jason did that got me on the path was he showed me how to send a text message using radio. That's all I needed. And I was not going to be satiated until I figured out how to do that. Right. And I had to learn a whole lot else to get there. And so I just need to inspire somebody on that one quest to get that one thing to get it done. And so I attempt to take this information and repackage it in a way that inspires somebody that gets bit by the bug so that they can chase whatever dragon they're on to get this communication thing. So I don't exactly exist in the space of doing this super high level, in-depth tech stuff. I know how to do it, but that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to inspire simply and translate some of these older concepts, stuff that's casual for people, that's absolutely fascinating for younger generations. That's my constant project. Coming up with new ways to do that. And I take a lot of inspiration from rap music videos and other huge TikTokers. And I kind of try and grab some things out of that space, music people. I grab some things out of that space, and those are things I'm passionate about, and I infuse it with radio and put it out there. And I believe that's why we've seen the success that we've seen in the short amount of time that we have with Gridbase, is because it resonates with people. So I will always be trying to figure out how to extrapolate those ideas and bring them to folks.
I think you touched on a really important point of leadership, which is you can drag people up a hill, and it's incredibly difficult to do that. But usually giving somebody the motivation to get up the hill is A, far more effective, but then B, they actually do the work, and doing the work is actually good for them. So
it wouldn't be till 3 years later that I started to figure out what Jason was talking about.
Right.
He's a great I was inspired 3 years before and always had it as a mental bookmark that I need to do that. So,
he did not drag you all the way up the hill. He just gave you the seed.
And so for me, that was during the Baofeng craze. Everybody's like, you gotta have a Baofeng. So, so I bought one, and then it sat.
Of course.
Just like everybody else. So for me, it was this thing of maybe something that I do for someone now by inspiring them doesn't have any sort of real effect till 3 years later. Totally okay with that. I don't care. I just want somebody to get tapped into this, because it's one of those tribal knowledge things that if you don't use it, you lose it. And I think that we have a responsibility to pass this stuff forward, even if it's in a new translation to a new set of ears.
For sure. Yeah. And what motivates me for a lot of the things that I do is my kids and thinking about their future. So I am, I'm a guy who has done a lot of different random jobs. I enjoy learning new stuff, but I would really like to figure out how to build some tools that are useful for generations, and not just do something that's fun for me, and then I'll be distracted and move on to the next project. So things like libraries, stores of information, or moving the needle on the mentality of being a consumer or being a producer. These are the things that I think will have multi-generational effects
Yeah, we're going to have a rule at my house that you're allowed to leave the house and ride your bike down the street when you can legally operate a radio.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
That's it, right? So I'll get my kids certed at 9 years old, 6 years old. They can totally, the kids are so sponges that they can totally pass a 35-question test with like 1 week of studying in the right materials. So if I can get my son, I'm like, dude, if you want to ride your bike down the street, go for it. What's your call sign?
Yeah.
You know, and I'm going to sad ham him up. I'm going to make him get certed, you know? I'm going to sad ham him all the way up. He's already been, when he was 6 months old, we took him to the Cowtown Ham Fest and he got a little future ham badge that they gave him. So cute. Yeah. So he's a year and a half now and I can't wait. We're 4 years out from him having a call sign. And then he can go down the road and he can call back to me. And that's how we're going to have to make it work because he's not getting a cell phone.
Okay.
He's not getting an iPad.
Yeah. Yeah, so my oldest is 9, and we're at this point where I do want them to have some level of computer savviness.
Sure.
But I don't want them to have the internet and everything that comes with the internet. So
what in Linux?
Yeah, so the other thing that I have been messing with recently is there are emulators for all the old retro computing platforms, and this makes me feel really old. Windows 98 is a retro computing platform that you can emulate now.
Yeah. That's great.
So that's something that we're tinkering with.
That's great. Yeah, I've often thought the same thing for my son because we won't do technology, like that for a very long time. I'm looking forward to getting to use my product in the future for homeschooling resources, so that he can browse the internet without being exposed to the dangers of the internet. I was homeschooled myself. And there was no internet access when I was a kid. And so, I'll do the same thing for him as well. But having that ability for him to search and learn about things in a safe environment is super inspirational for me. I mean, we're definitely aligned in those kinds of things with the children thing. But I think I've often thought too with my son that he will have the rights to have his own computer and do all of that at a certain age when he can do basic Linux programming. For me now, knowing the back end has helped me tremendously. I'm more successful at work. I'm more in touch with my day-to-day life because I understand how the skeleton is running the machine. Yeah. And so I think that it's super, we don't just put our kids on a 250 dirt bike. We put them on a Strider. And when we put them on, and I think it's crazy that with technology, we just throw them this 250cc two-stroke dirt bike of a piece of technology without any on-ramp. So I think for my son, surely we will get him that Linux on-ramp so that he can more appropriately understand the basis of when he does get on the 250cc dirt bike, how to keep his balance and not whiskey throttle it out. Yeah. And, to put it in a motor term.
Yeah. Well, and to understand kind of how it works too. So this is something that I've talked to our cameraman about. So at some point he's going to come on the podcast. We're going to have a conversation we had before, which is he's our age, but he has spent a lot of time building teams of younger guys in the video production area. And if you start out as a phone person, as an app person, you start out seeing only this layer of abstraction, the several layers from the bare metal. So I feel like my problem solving capability is infinitely enhanced by growing up with computers that didn't have hard drives. So stuff had to be on a floppy drive. You had to think about which floppy drive it was. You had to copy it into RAM. Like you had to understand some real basics. And I don't use any of those skills anymore, but I think that is the mentality that helps you troubleshoot and learn stuff. And you don't think about random stuff existing in a cloud that an algorithm will show you when the algorithm is ready. You think about, I need this file. This is the file format that I stored in. This is what I need to convert it into if I want to do something else with it. This is what it needs to be if it's going to work with this. This is what it needs to be if it's going to drive a CNC machine. This is what it needs to be if it's going to drive a laser. That I think is really, really important stuff. And it's too easy to give somebody an iPad and say like, draw squiggly shapes or, whatever.
Put this triangle over that one. Yeah, no, there's absolutely value to learning those things. I think we talked about innovation earlier. Now that I have some basic level of understanding of how Linux works, I've built different programs. You were talking about the manufacturing process. Is this thing for a CNC or is it for whatever? I've built different soft programs that allow me to process things better. So as an example, I have a testing script that will test 10 pockets at a time, as opposed to sitting there and doing it individually.
Right.
So it's like I've
nice.
innovated a program
Yeah.
to help me out with something. So I think too, like for the future generations, if we're raising thoughtful people that are going to contribute to society in some way, shape, or form, that having that basis of understanding, especially in a tech-forward world, is super critical for them to be able to think with that part of their brain to innovate whatever the next thing is, as opposed to just being a GUI user.
Yeah, you mentioned that some of the Linux stuff that you've learned has helped you at work.
Yeah.
You probably don't want to talk about your actual job, but can you talk about ways that has helped you out?
Yeah, so I work in a manufacturing environment, and we use a lot of custom programs built specifically for our manufacturing process, and they're awful. There was very little thought given to the graphical user interface of how something works, right? It's task focused only. It would probably be better for me if these programs were ran from the command line, as opposed to trying to figure out which one of these buttons that are all the same color beige and whatever. It'd be easier for me to do it that way. But so at work, there's
being able to see underneath,
knowing
behind the control panel.
So this button is going to do this thing in that server, and then that's going to be... So I've actually gotten in touch with some of the networking guys there and have a better understanding of the server room that's on site and how I'm interacting with that server room so that I can extract data more efficiently or what have you. And so, in that way, it's made a lot more sense for my day-to-day interaction. I can learn programs much more easily. So, at different times, I may be interfacing with a new program that I haven't ever seen before that's a part of the manufacturing process that I'm involved with, and I'm able to onboard really quick with that.
Nice. Yeah.
Where some people who are, and people do struggle there, they are operating at a... And I'm not in IT, I'm in manufacturing. There are other people that are also in manufacturing that are trying to figure out this program, and they're like, it's not as good as Facebook, or it's not as good as the Instagram app or whatever, and they have a really hard time. And a lot of people will just opt out of using the program entirely, and they'll lean on specialists or other people to interface with that program, making them less inefficient and bogging down supervisors or whatever because the team doesn't know how to use it. But the IT department has some fault to carry there with not making it user friendly, but that's not the focus in big time manufacturing. It's utility only.
And sometimes there's a missing level of teamwork where the IT guys don't fully understand the task. The people performing the task don't understand the budget, or maybe they don't understand the lingo that the IT guys want to communicate. It
almost always comes down to budget, I've found. The company doesn't want to allocate the budget towards getting dark mode, or something like that, because an entire reskin of a program, like there's other more pressing things. So, but when you are in late stage capitalism where budget and bottom line is the number one focus, the last thing you're going to get is a beautiful program. You're going to get utility only. So, whereas like a software manufacturer like Adobe or something like that, that's their thing.
That's their thing.
But for someone that's using it as a tool, as a manufacturing process, like it's budget first.
Yeah. And when that happens, when you are so constrained in some areas, you kind of miss stuff. And a lot of it, I think, comes back to taxes and regulations and things. Like going back to the supersonic jetliner.
Right.
The FAA has some responsibility to control stuff. I will concede that. But a speed limit is totally the wrong way to solve the problem that they wanted to solve. They wanted to solve the problem of sonic booms inside of cities. Like that should be a decibel limit, not a speed limit. And then you solve the problem properly, as opposed to just saying this problem isn't allowed to be solved. And now you're stuck with, being stuck where you're at. So I think that the same thing is true with some of when you are inside a company and you're really focused on profit, you're really focused on which budget is available for this particular project, it's really easy for you to not look at all the options that are on the table. Because it could be that you blow your budget 1 month to do this thing, and then you're saving so much money over the next 12 months that you should have done it properly the first time.
That's not how large corporations look at anything.
Well, and the problem
That's the brilliant mind of Isaac Bakken talking about how he runs his manufacturing process at T-Rex. But
if you want to look at money,
we need you at large corporations.
If you want
Isaac.
to look at money, great. You have to look at money. The only way that T-Rex works is money. So money is. I'm not trying to, but you got to look at money over time, not just money today.
Yeah. Well, we need more people that think like that in higher level executive positions.
Well, and I think that I think we're looking at kind of another issue too. When stuff gets too big and complicated, some of those big executives, they're not high enough level that they're worried about the future of the company over 5 years,
right.
But they are high enough level that they get in trouble if a monthly budget gets blown. So their survival depends on the monthly budget and not the company's survival. And that's, when you have that many moving parts and that level of complexity, you start to run into some issues. So
we can talk about Elon again and talk about the efficiency.
Yeah, efficiency. Well, once again, we're back to an issue that is solved when people take personal responsibility.
How does what you just said apply to everything at large, right? Like the government, as an example. We have people that are focused right now on this thing because that's what they're responsible for, but at a higher level, and cost overruns over a period aren't being looked at.
And I think that's something that's happening with FEMA. Like we mentioned before, there are people who are very angry at FEMA for mismanaging the situation that is there. I think I don't know anyone personally at FEMA who is there right now, but I know that I've interacted with FEMA people before, and they're like, the job of FEMA is this, but my job is this. Right. So when I get on the ground, I'm like, man, when you get on the ground, I don't want to deal with you because you're not going to be thinking about the bigger picture. Right. You're only going to be thinking about your area of responsibility that was written by a bureaucrat that got his budget from a politician. And you're not going to say, oh, it's problem solving time.
Right.
I'm going to tear that fence down. I'm going to use it for this. I'm going to let that guy do these things with these things. There won't be that level of personal responsibility being taken by some of these folks who work for the government.
Right. Because
the government doesn't thrive on giving people personal responsibility.
Yeah.
So I think that it has to be solved at a bunch of different levels. But none of them we can solve except for one. There's one place where you can solve this, and that's you can take more personal responsibility yourself.
Took the words out of my mouth. That's what I was
I can't solve Elon Musk's problems.
We saw community and the importance of that. Yeah. That's what we saw. That is the first line defense, which is what T-Rex has been promoting from the beginning, which is that you are the first line defender. Period. You should not rely on cops and 15-minute response times. Like that's what you guys have been about. That's the message you guys have been putting forward, and you can stand on that because it's a good message. And we watch it play out in Eastern Tennessee, where the community members there are the first line defense. People with chainsaws. What I think it was Tim Kennedy said: "Get rid of all your FEMA guys. Give me one redneck. That's all I need."
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so true. You just need one hardworking person that cares about his community to make a difference.
Yeah.
And hopefully that person, I'm not even gonna say hopefully, that person will have an impact.
Absolutely.
Way beyond just that one person. Take as many government grants as you want to get and as many FEMA employees as you want to get. It will not have, because they can't care about the community. It's a job.
Way, yeah. And there's guys in FEMA. There's a guy in particular I'm thinking of who's an amazing guy. And I know that he would absolutely.
Talking about Chris?
It's not Chris. I'm talking about a different guy. Okay. But he's a guy that I would trust to show up on the scene and be like, oh, I'm going to help these people.
Right.
I probably won't have a job tomorrow. I don't care. I'm going to help these people. We're gonna fix this problem. We're going to do the mission of FEMA, even though the mission of FEMA isn't technically my job description. Right. There's guys like that, and the way that you fix these things is you be a guy like that. Right. It's real easy to point out problems because there's lots of them. Like it's really easy to complain about the FAA making that stupid Mach 1 rule, but I can't fix the FAA. It's really easy to complain about schools and say that's why we homeschool. I can't fix the school system, but I can homeschool and maybe, in this podcast, plant a little seed, give somebody a little nudge in that direction. Then 3 years from now, when they have kids, they remember that homeschooling was a thing that was an option on the table. Right. So I think that if you're telling people to take personal responsibility, you have to start by doing it yourself.
Yeah.
And then it's going to be painful and expensive, and it's going to seem superfluous sometimes. Like, I don't know about you, but I'm still paying taxes for public schools that my kids are not going to use.
Yeah. I don't think about it.
It's just going to be a thing that keeps happening, but I still am going to do the homeschooling thing. Yeah. I think that Google should make it easier for me to download my own data and not just want to feed it to me through a straw that they control. But I can't change Google. I can just go build an alternative thing. And it feels like a lot of extra work that Google is already capable of doing with their big servers. There's a lot of personal responsibility that you have to take that feels unnecessary, unpleasant, and it's not your job. But if nobody else is doing it, it's your job.
Yeah, it's somebody's mantle to take up the regulation thing, right? It's somebody's mantle to take up the taxes thing. It's like somebody out there, that's their thing.
Yeah.
They're going to change that thing, you know? And then there's other people that are focused on holsters and offering information. Like, that's the beauty of where we're at still in society, is that we still have some semblance of that freedom left where people can make those choices to be active in their town hall, to, you know, prevent certain regulations from getting passed, or approving funding for another park, or what have you. Whatever someone's mantle is, you know, that's what they have to run with. It's been put on their heart for a particular reason.
Yeah.
You know, no one's going to carry the Gridbase mantle. No one's going to carry the T-Rex Talk mantle, and all those different things. Like, it's individual. I think that's the biggest thing that we have trouble with now as a society, is people tapping into the identity and the thing that pushes them to that independent expression of making an impact, you know, because there's so many other distractions that prevent people from landing on that. And the system is almost specifically designed to keep people from landing on that. And this, by the system, I specifically mean public schooling. You know, you're supposed to fall in line and think like everyone else. So we end up with a lack of individual thought. But, you know, everybody finds that at their own time. Sun Ra was an amazing jazz musician that did not find his following until his mid-late 50s. You know, he was a traditional standard jazz player all the way up until that time. So at any point in time that somebody unlocks that creative freedom and that spark that allows them to make an impact that lasts long beyond them, like, that's a good time. Maybe it happens when you're a Lucas at 16 making holsters. Or maybe it happens at a Sun Ra when he's 55 playing jazz.
Yeah. There's gonna be stuff that changes, that causes people to switch directions, find new things, be motivated to build stuff because a baby's on the way. Changing circumstances are a big deal. And I think we're about to see a lot of change. The cool thing is that when you are watching certain things crumble, it's so much easier. Like, my parents talked about homeschooling at a time when nobody wanted to hear about homeschooling. Right. Well, the public schools have gotten...
homeschooling's cool now.
Public schools, and I don't know if I'm going too far here. They seem to have gotten a little bit worse since I was a kid. It's a lot easier to talk about homeschooling now. And homeschoolers, we're still weird, but homeschoolers have had a long enough run that people are like, maybe can handle that level of weird. Yeah. So there are ways in which the pioneers are out there doing the work, even if there's stuff that we haven't thought about. Once we get into the research, we'll probably find pioneers that have already done some of the heavy lifting. There's already going to be stuff that we can learn from and capitalize on. Like, most people don't know that Jason is out there doing cool radio videos. The coolest radio videos. And once they find him, they'll go, oh, the door's already been pushed open. Yeah. I just have to do the following things to go through.
He's a software designer for like JS8 Call and, you know, like a lot of the different radio programs that are out there that have to do with text messaging over HF. Like, Jason has some hand in, like, super cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess we'll finish this episode off with a couple of homework assignments. It's been a while since we've done homework assignments on the show, but first thing is go check out Gridbase stuff. Is it easier for people to go to the YouTube channel or just go straight to your website? You do a lot of stuff on Instagram and various other social media platforms.
Yeah, I hang out on Instagram as like my primary resource to inform people and get out there. We're changing that in 2025. We'll be doing a lot more YouTube stuff. But, you know, the home for everything is www.gridbase.net. We have a podcast, and that's usually where I onboard people for the radio stuff. Episodes 2 and 3 is just an onboarding for radio. So if that's what you want to do, you can dive into that. The Instagram is much more off the top of the dome, things that I think that are interesting, sharing resources, and a lot of that. The YouTube is legacy stuff. We haven't posted on there in a while, but we have a really big video coming up in partnership with Avon. So nice. I'm really looking forward to that. We're going to be setting
Avon
up
stuff right behind you.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
We're going to be setting up a repeater in an urban environment.
Cool.
Climbing grain silos and talking about what it means to set up repeaters in urban environments and different tools to use for that. There's a new-ish company out there called One Stone Systems that makes a product called the LMAP.
Yes.
It's very cool. So we're going to be integrating the LMAP into that video, and it's really an opportunity for us to discuss the LMAP and what it can be used for and how it can be used. So hang on to the YouTube. There's 15,000 other people over there that are hanging on. So if you go over there and check it out, and we'll be posting videos soon. But as always, if you have questions, email me at info@gridbase.net.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And then the second homework assignment, you're already doing it. Take more responsibility and build stuff even where nobody wants it. Because, the best way to get change at FEMA is not actually through lobbying. It's not actually through electing a guy to get a law changed. It's actually to be a redneck with a chainsaw and a bulldozer and prove that FEMA is unnecessary and outperform them. And that's the coolest thing. And that's why I think people are angry at Elon. It's not so much that he's doing stuff that they don't like. They're doing stuff that they do like. Yeah. But they're showing everybody, he's showing everybody up with his companies.
What do we title this episode? Is it Musings about Elon?
He is a constant thread.
He's a constant thread in this conversation.
No, I think we titled this episode, Why Not to Build a Supersonic Jetliner Until 2028.
Okay. Excellent. Isaac, thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here in Tennessee in the T-Rex studio. And I really appreciate all the time that you've given me here today. And we'll look forward to seeing you at SHOT Show in January, most likely.
Probably be a SHOT Show, but I also have stuff going on around Texas, so we may cross paths again.
Looking forward to that.
There are offline conversations that are going to happen as soon as we hit stop, and we'll make some more plans.
Awesome.
So thank you very much for watching the show. You can do all the social media stuff. Do you want to tell people the social media stuff that you've learned from rap videos and TikToks? Because I am behind on that. What are they supposed to do? Smash the bell?
No. So one thing that people do that
question the question. What?
It's like there's a scene tag or something. So I don't know that it'll fit for this format, but we can do a separate format video where we introduce people to those kinds of antics.
Deeply uncomfortable with this. So that's our show. Thanks for watching. It's really easy to look at the work that Jake is doing with Gridbase and the things that he's building and see him as some sort of technological marvel. But the big takeaway, I think, which he said, is there's nothing really special about that. The software already exists, the hardware exists. He's putting them together and trying to inspire people to do more with the tools that they have. So that's my main takeaway, and I think it should be yours.